Brakes on a Mercedes are super easy to do. I'm going to show you guys just how to do them. And while we're at it, we're also going to change the brake fluid. I'm going to tell you what kind of brake fluid to use and why. And we'll also rotate the tires. Let's jump right in. Obviously, the first thing we're going to do is jack up the cars and remove the wheels. And then we'll put the key in the ignition so that allows us to turn the front wheels left to right. We are doing the front and the rear brakes. They're both fixed calipers, unlike the floating caliper design. The front ones on the Mercedes have a 4-piston calipers, whereas the ones in the back are 2-piston calipers. The system is super easy. We're going to punch out these 2 pins right here, remove the brake sensor, and we'll slide the spring out and slide the brake pads out. I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like when it's done. These are all the tools you're going to need to get the job done on these brakes. A punch about this size, which is a 1/8 size punch. This is too big of a hammer, but it's all I had around the house right now to make this job happen. Anything a lot smaller than this will do just fine. Plastic, try to use plastic when it comes to prying the brakes apart and pushing the pistons inside the calipers. Again, don't use metals. So yeah, these are the tools you're going to need to get the job done. And this is what it looks like with the brake pads removed. These are your old brake pads right here. These are the plates that I was telling you about. They will go in the back of the new pads. These are your pins, and this is the spring. And this brake pad, as you can see, it was just about, see it? The sensor was about to go off. I'm sure there's still some meat on these, but I've had these brake pads on this car for several years now. And for some reason, when you step on it, they don't bite very good. Another reason why I'm changing the oil and bleeding the brakes on it as well. So once we'll install the new brake pads and make sure that, you see it? This is what I was talking about. This plate goes back here like this. And we'll put these in and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done. And this, guys, what it looks like when it's all done. Make sure that the spring is properly installed and it's not installed backwards. You're supposed to have these tabs pushed down on the new brake shoes, and these 2 tabs are the retainers for the pins. Pins going through this way. Make sure you punch them in all the way, and that the brake shoe and the plate the holes are aligned so that when you punch the pin through, it picks up on the plate as well on both sides, top and bottom. Push in the new brake wear sensor in, and this is what it looks like when the job is all done. We now move to the rear brakes. As you can see, for the rear, the concept is the same, but this one, instead of being a 4-piston caliper, it's a 2-piston calipers, but they're on the opposite side, making this a fixed caliper as well. Also, while you're changing the brakes, take the time to check the rotors, and these ones are fine. Same thing, we're going to pop out the brake sensor. We'll punch out the pins, unload the spring, and with your hands, you should be able to open up the brake pads, or again, use one of these plastic prying tools to get in there and open the calipers. I mean, so that the brakes are separated from the rotor. Don't use metal tools to pry the brake pads apart from the calipers. You do not want to do that. All right, so again, let's go ahead and punch these 2 pins out and remove the brake sensor and remove the brake pads. I'm going to show you how it's done. And we have it. The brake pads are out. And if you can see, the pistons are pushed back in. Also check for leaks or wet areas. Make sure that there is no brake fluid seeping out, but everything looks good. You'll see that on the old pads, there's these 2 metal plates. Be sure to put the new brake pads with the metal plate that comes with the calipers. So here's your brake sensor. Insert it in the hole that goes right in there, and then snap it in place right here, and here's your connector right here. So let's go ahead and put the brake pads back in. Make sure you install the spring properly. As you can see, it's mounted this way, not this way, this way, such as the front. All right, let's put it all back together. There it is, guys. It's done. That's what it's supposed to look like. Don't forget the original plates. They go in between the brake pad and the caliper pistons. This is how the spring goes in. Your brake sensor is plugged back in and snapped back in place into the new brake shoes. Now we are going to change the brake fluid and bleed the brakes. Let's do it. Now that we are done with replacing all the brake pads front and back, what we're going to do next is replace the brake fluid. I'm using this pump because I'm by myself, and this is essentially a vacuum pump for multiple applications, and one of them being bleeding and servicing of the brake fluid. And it's a Medivac, I think it's called, and this is the one right here. If you're interested in picking something like this up, I got it at Harbor Freight. If it's of any help to you, excuse me. So this is the setup. So what I'll do, I'll insert the tubing in here, and I'll empty out this master cylinder reservoir and pour in new .4 fluid. Okay, so the first thing I did is empty out the brake reservoir. As you can see, it's pretty empty. Be sure that before you empty it out, you remove this filter here, you clean everything. Also, guys, make sure that the brake fluid does not get to the paint, because brake fluid will eat up your paint. With that hand pump that I showed you guys earlier, I pumped out the brake fluid, and you see it's kind of murky. And what I'll do next is I'll fill up the reservoir with a new .4 synthetic brake fluid. Now, why .4? Brake fluid, first of all, is hydroscopic, and usually the higher the number of the brake fluid, .4, is much more hydroscopic, meaning it tends to retain the moisture much more than, say, in a .3 or .2. But the nice thing about the .4 and .5 or higher number oils, they're more resistant to higher temperatures and higher pressures before they start boiling. Now, why is this important? Because say on a car that has 4 or 6 piston calipers, they're usually a high performance caliper or brake system versus a single piston or double piston fluid and calipers, they all generate a huge amount of heat, which in turn can translate to brake fluid starting to boil, which in turn will create bubbles, which in turn will cause your brakes to fail. This is why you use a .4 brake fluid, such as in this case, and a 4 piston calipers, and that's also what Mercedes ML class calls for. You could always move from a .3 to a .4, but you don't want to move from a .4 to a .3 oil. So what we'll do now is we'll fill up the reservoir, both the chambers with the .4 oil, and we'll put the sensor back on, and then we'll move on to hooking up the pump and start sucking oil out from each and every caliper. Some guys say to start from the very back and move your way to the from the longest distance to the shortest distance, or you could go from the shortest distance to the longest distance, depending on who you talk to. The bottom line is, guys, the oil needs to get changed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the shortest distance, which is the driver's side front, then move to the driver's side, the passenger side front, and then I'll move to the driver's side rear, and then I'll do the passenger side rear, and I will keep sucking oil until clean oil comes out and all the air bubbles come out. Obviously, after each caliper is done, which I'll show you, always come here and reservice the reservoir. What you don't want to do is empty out the reservoir and start introducing air into the system. Then what that happens is you're going to have to start all over again. So, like I said, let's go ahead and service some .4 synthetic into that reservoir, and we're going to start sucking oil from the calipers. Let's do it. Well, guys, the whole pump thing and doing the bleeding of the brake by myself didn't work out. I hooked up the pump at the calipers. It was sucking, but it wasn't sucking any oil out. Ended up I had to call a friend of mine to come over, and with him pumping the brakes the old-fashioned way, we ended up bleeding out the brakes only. I didn't change the oil on the brake system because it turns out I didn't have enough oil. Nevertheless, we did get the brakes done, and you guys get to see it, how it's done. It's super easy. You don't even need any tools. You just need a hammer and a pin, really. I hope this video was of help to you, and we will see you the next time. And make sure you subscribe and give it a thumbs up if it was of help to you. Talk to you later. Bye.